All right, so one thing you guys are going to notice from the article on effective altruism is that utilitarians think we have a lot more in the way of obligations or duties to help others than we might think we do. Utilitarians think that we have to do a lot to help people who are complete strangers, maybe even people in the future we'll never meet if you're McCaskill and you're into this long-termism idea. Well, why do utilitarians think this, and what is it going to look like? Well, the main reason utilitarians think this is that the whole goal of the theory is to create the most overall happiness. And it does not matter whose happiness it is. It could be your happiness, it could be your children, or your husband or wife's happiness, or your parents, but it could also be the happiness of someone half a world away. All happiness counts the same for utilitarians. Your happiness should count for no more or less than anybody else's. And a utilitarian will say, look, everybody's pleasure feels the same, everybody's pain feels the same. Why weigh it any different? Strangers' happiness is just as important as the happiness of your family. And when you start to cash this out, when what you have to do is create the greatest overall happiness, this starts to look incredibly demanding because there's all sorts of sacrifices you or I or the average person could make that would make us less happy, but make someone else much, much happier. And this makes utilitarianism extremely demanding as a moral theory. And we'll talk a little bit more about how and what this looks like. The first thing to notice is that many actions that we think of as above and beyond the call of duty, we might call them saintly, or philosophers have this bit of jargon, supererogatory. What that means is actions that would be really good to do, really nice to do. You would deserve praise if you do them. You would not deserve any blame if you don't. Utilitarians will actually say those actions, or many of them, are morally required. Let me give you two examples. One example, and this is from the Peter Singer article that, the New Yorker article I had you guys read references. Singer says, well, look, most of us, people in the Western world, we're well off comparatively, right? Even poor people in America are much better off than people in the poorest countries in the world, right? And most of us, we spend a lot of money on things we don't strictly need. And Singer means strictly need in the strictest sense of strictly need, right? The stuff you need to survive and be healthy and hold down a job to support yourself, right? Singer says, look, imagine you have $50 that you want to spend on something. Be it a trip to the movies, be it a nice dinner. Singer's example is nice pants. It could be more or less money. It could be 25 or 100. And Singer says, well, look, if you send that money to a charity that helps people in the poorest countries in the world, people who are starving, people who are ill, people who have health problems we don't even see in our well-off countries, that money would actually create a lot more happiness than if you spend it on yourself. $50 could literally save someone's life or keep them from going blind, half a world away. Give it to a charity. There's a lot that do work like this, Oxfam, International Rescue Committee, things like that. $50 can save a life or save somebody from having horrible medical problems we just don't see in America, like river blindness, malaria, things like that. What's going to create more happiness? You buy nice pants, even if they're really nice pants and you love them. $50 don't even buy that nice pants, right? Or give it to a charity who will help a person half a world away. And Singer says, well, look, think about the next $50 of disposable income you have. Maybe you want to go to the movies. Maybe you want to buy a nice shirt this time. maybe you want to, whatever you would spend $50 on. Well, with that next $50, what is going to create more happiness? You spending it on yourself, or you giving it up to some charity that will aid people in some desperately poor country. Singer says for the next $50, it's going to create more happiness sending it to these people in very poor countries. People are just worse off. It's easier to help them. What's more, your money is just going to go much further in a very poor country than it will in America. Singer, when he writes the essay, he's thinking of a famine in Bangladesh in the early 70s. He says, all these people who are buying stuff for themselves, they could send it to Bangladesh, or rather to India, where the Bangladeshi refugees were for the most part, and keep these people from starving or dying of horrible diseases. Now, I'll come back to this. There's some problems with Singer's argument, especially with the history of Bangladesh. It might not be as simple as he makes out, and that'll be a general problem for utilitarianism. But the thought is, and this is the thing that gets a lot of these effective altruists going, you could do more good with the money if you spend it on someone else who is much poorer, much worse off, than if you spend it on yourself or your family, right? I'm getting on a kick of buying books for my kids. My boys love books. I also shred them sometimes, which infuriates me, but I won't get off on talking about that, right? What's going to do more good? I could buy Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, which I know my kids will love. They really like Mo Willems. But man, that $10 could do so much more elsewhere than it does here, right? It could maybe save a life. It could get treatment for malaria. It's so easy to buy these mosquito nets that prevent malaria. How many mosquito nets could you buy to prevent malaria? So many. Even if the boys are going to love Don't Let the Pigeon Drive the Bus, $10 is probably going to do more good elsewhere, right? So on and so forth. Or I'll give you another example that I think is even clearer. Look, most of us, I'm going to bet, most of you listening to this have 2 healthy kidneys. Not a given, maybe you don't. If you don't, sorry, but the odds are most people listening do, right? You could give one of those away to a stranger who is in kidney failure, and you could make that person much, much happier. You will greatly lengthen their life, and you will greatly improve the quality of life they have now, right? Being on dialysis is pretty bad, right? It's a real chore. It's painful. It's awkward. It takes time out of people's lives. If you gave a stranger a kidney, they would not have to go through that. What's more, they would live longer than they're going to if they don't get a transplant. What are the costs to you? Well, it's going to hurt. Surgery hurts, right? Doctors would probably say, well, there'll be some discomfort, right? When a doctor says there will be some discomfort, what they mean is it's going to hurt like hell, right? But it's not going to hurt for that long, I don't think, right? Surgery will hurt. If they cut you open, you are going to feel not great afterwards, right? But you'll get over that relatively quickly. And yes, there are some very small chances for most people that this will negatively impact your health. Like your chances of your other kidney failing go up just ever so slightly, the tiniest percentage, but it's very rare. In fact, the effect on people's health it's very tiny. Most people are fine. The kidney you have left, in 99 point, I don't know how many percent, but over, the vast majority of cases, your other kidney just grows bigger. You're just fine, compensates, right? You will sacrifice some of your own happiness, but you will create much more by the difference you make with this other person. Now, in both of these cases, I think we would think that someone who did either of these things, give away practically all their money to help the poor half a world away, give up a kidney to help a complete stranger, we would think those are saintly actions. People who do that are good, but none of us are required to do that. Because both of these actually create more happiness than the alternative, we keep our money, we keep our quote unquote spare kidney, the utilitarian would say we're actually morally required to do that. So, one result of this is we have to do much more to help others than most of us think. But the other big thing, and this is where the effective altruists get off the ground, is they say we have much less, in fact, they think no latitude in who we help or how. We should help as efficiently as possible, which for the utilitarian means creating the most happiness. If the charity I want to give to is not the most efficient, if it's not creating the most happiness, then I'm not doing the right thing. I have to find the most efficient charity and create the most happiness. And it's interesting because these effective altruist types, they actually step in and say, well, Singer, you're on the right track. We have to do more to help other people, but there's more efficient things than the things you have in mind. You think we should give to Oxfam for famine relief. Well, we're going to find evidence that you get more bang for your buck for deworming initiatives or giving people money directly. Whatever it is, we have to do, not just we have to do a lot more to help others, we have to do it as efficiently as possible. We pick the cause and the way to help others that creates the most happiness, and if it's not the one best way that creates the most happiness, then we're not doing the right thing. Now that seems weird to me, right? Most of us, our thoughts about assistance are kind of all over the place, but I think most of us think we have some duty to help others, right? If I never give a dime to charity and I'm pretty well off, you would probably think less of me, right? I think less of people who could give money to help others and never do it. So it seems like we have some duties, right? Most of us don't think we have as much of a duty as utilitarians think. And we also think that people have some latitude, right? Look, I give a lot of money. When I give away money, I a lot of times give it to the church I go to, right? And the reason I do this is I'm just very grateful that they have a nursery and I can put my kids in that nursery, right? They're a little older now, but I remember for a long time, I had like 6 months old, and I was just like, here, take these babies in the nursery, right? I think it's a huge service they have to have a nursery. I appreciate that this nice, very grandmotherly woman will watch my kids. It's one of the reasons I give them money, right? I used to, before that, I used to give the church my parents used to go to a fair amount of money. And it was because I won't get into it, but some bad things happened, and the minister was extremely helpful to my family. She did a lot of work, right? And I'm just like, well, I'm really grateful to this woman, Grace Kim. I will give the church she pastors money. Now, I never thought that this was the most efficient way to do it. I'm going to create the most happiness by giving to this country church in southwestern Virginia. No, I just think, well, I have some latitude in how I give money away. I'm choosing this because of my own personal history. The utilitarian would say that's wrong. If you giving to Dinwiddie Presbyterian Church in Southwest Virginia is not creating the most happiness, you should stop and you should find a more efficient place to give to. I don't know. That seems a bit odd to me. I mean, on the one hand, if you give away money to a charity and it doesn't do any real good, that does seem wrong. But if the charity's doing some real good, it seems weird to say you have to pick the most efficient one, right? I mean, look, I get these appeals for money from UVA all the time, and I think it would be stupid to give UVA any money, even though I thought I got a fine education from them. I'm like, you guys have like 10 billion in the endowment. I'm not giving you any money. No, you don't need it, right? I do think people who give to the schools they went to when those schools are really well off, I don't think they should do that. That's a waste of money. On the other hand, it doesn't seem wrong to me if you give to your church, even if it's not the most efficient way to help people, or if you give to a charity that you have some personal connection to, even if it's maybe not the absolute most efficient, right? You know, if you were homeless once and so you volunteer in a soup kitchen, it would seem weird to fault you for that because you're like, well, there's more efficient things you could do with your time to create more happiness. I don't know. Our thoughts about charity are mixed and weird, but the utilitarian seems too extreme, both in the amount they want us to help and in the fact they say we have to do it as efficiently, as effectively as possible, that we don't have latitude. But it's just a neat result of the theory, just, neat in the sense it just follows right out of it, right? If all you care about is creating the most happiness, it seems hard to avoid this, right? You need to be efficient. So, the worry here is too much sacrifice. And this is an objection people make against utilitarianism, that it asks for too much from us in the way of helping others to our own cost. Now, is this a counterexample to the theory? Is this something that shows the theory is wrong? I am not sure. I think there are two utilitarian replies. One utilitarian reply is just that the sacrifice doesn't need to be huge. We can make ourselves into the kind of people who actually enjoy helping others, even if we have to give up a lot of material goods. Think about the people in the article on effective altruism. A lot of them have given away a lot of stuff. Most of them don't seem like they're completely miserable. And the other utilitarian reply is, look, they can just say morality might require more of us than we thought, right? A few hundred years ago, the idea that we have any kind of duty not to hurt animals or cause them pain would have been mysterious to a lot of people. A lot of people, up until very recently, would have thought the very idea you have any duties to people outside your own community just seems weird, right? Utilitarians would say, we have made a lot of moral progress, and we might make more moral progress, and part of making moral progress is morality is more, we realize it asks more from us than we might have thought. We don't think we have these huge duties to help others, or at least we don't until we think it through, but once we think it through, the utilitarian will say that we do. I don't know what to do with this. The utilitarian reply is not terrible. It also seems to me that there is a lot to this charge that utilitarianism asks for too much sacrifice on our part to help others. I don't know. Most of us don't want this to be true, I'm sure, because we don't want to give up our nice stuff. I don't know. So we have to think about the fact of what we want to be true and what not to be. This seems like an issue to me. I'm not sure it's a knockout punch of a counterexample, though. All right, in the next lecture, I'm going to talk about some things, or start getting into some things that I think are much more problematic for the utilitarians, though.